Hey guys, this is Nikki with The Fashion Addict. Thanks so much for participating with the sew along of this jacket dress. We are moving right along, okay? So we left off with attaching the top of our neck. So we left off with number 6 on the pattern, if you're working with Vogue 8825. And we are at step 7, where you are attaching or sewing your bodice at the top, which is like your neck seam. Something I did not film before is double stitching at the neck seam. If you see, you'll see the 2 stitches there. So you stitch at the 5/8 seam allowance, and then once again within the seam allowance at about the 1/4 seam allowance. And next, what we're going to do is iron this. According to the instructions, it tells you to iron it to the left. So we're going to iron this flat, and then we're going to pick up pattern piece number 4, which is the back of the bodice. We're going to attach that, stay stitch at the top, double stitch down the center seam, and then eventually we're going to attach the front to the back of the bodice. Okay, and then next steps after that, we're going to attach our sleeve cuff. A lot of things coming up, so pay attention. If you have questions, feel free to leave comments below. I'll be back. So what I'm doing right here is just ironing down the top of that neck seam allowance. And then next we are going to move to the sewing machine with pattern piece number 4, and we're going to stay stitch the top according to the pattern instructions. And then hey guys, all right, so I just ironed the bodice, the front of the bodice. We're moving right along. I'm actually going to skip a part of step 8. I'm not going to sew in the dart. You can sew in the dart if you want. I'm not. So next thing is double stitching number 4. So I like to usually keep all my stuff pinned to the pattern piece until I'm ready to sew it, just so I know what I'm working with. So because I've already worked with them, and I think this might actually be right sides out. Okay, so I didn't mark the wrong side, so I'm just going to assume that the right side is together already. And if you actually cut yours out, right sides together, then you'll do the same. And just pin it down the center seam of the back. And then we're going to start sewing it together. I only pinned it twice because I'm being lazy. Let's see if you guys can see this. And this. All right, so we are at the 5/8 seam allowance. I know you can't see that too good, but that's where we're at. 5/8 seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the top and the bottom. Sounds like it's time to change my needle, so I'll probably do that here in a second. I don't know why I do that. Just matching up my bottoms and making sure that my fabric is staying together. And back stitch at the end. So the instructions tell you to double stitch here, so that's what we're going to do. There's my 1 stitch at the 5/8, and I'm going to stitch within that 5/8 in my seam allowance at the 1/4 mark. back stitching at the front and back. Yeah, it's time for me to switch out my needle, so I'll do that on a break. If you guys ever have a chance to listen to my podcast, I talk a little bit about knowing when to switch out your needles, and your machine should sound like really smooth. Don't forget to back stitch, and we're done. So we have stitched here at the 5/8 and again at the 1/4 seam allowance. Not sure if that's a good place for you to see it. So 5/8 is here, and then 1/4 seam allowance. And then now we are going to iron this down to the left according to our instructions. And the next step is stay stitching. So I'll actually save you guys the ironing time. I'm not gonna show you guys me ironing. Just go ahead and take this time to iron your center stitch towards your left. This is towards my right, but it's towards the left. Anyways, and we'll be back with stay stitching. All right, you guys, we're back. All right, so I have gone ahead and ironed. Can't really see that because I'm not prepared, but don't forget to also trim within your seam allowance. That is also within the instructions. So you can see this, I have ironed it to the left side here, and I've also trimmed my seam allowance off. Now I'm going to stay stitch. So stay stitching is usually done within a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Yeah, and I'm not following the pattern instructions. I'm just going to stay stitch. Usually it's between 2 dots. I'm doing it across the whole back. This is totally okay. I'm not breaking rules. You do not have to backstitch when you're stay stitching, okay? So let me pick up the instructions to see what's next. I think next is just attaching our front to our back. I'll be back. All right, you guys, so what's next is we are about to pin, after we stay stitched the back, the front, the top of the neck of the bodice, sorry about that. We are going to pin the front of the bodice to the back of the bodice. So it's easier if you have a dress form. If you don't, it's totally okay. You can just follow your lines. It's simple, don't make this hard. So here's the top. You're gonna pin right sides together. So I have my right side on the inside. What I'm going to do is just flip. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me drop you. Sorry. Okay. So I'm actually going to just flip. This is how it was on the dress form. I'm going to just flip it up. Match it at the center seams. Make sure your pins are handy, not like me. So I like to just start with the seams when I pin stuff together. Bam. Then you just want to work out and pin. Luckily, this anchor of fabric doesn't move too much, so you shouldn't have a problem pinning. Okay, so there, just stuck 3 pins in, and I'm working towards the sleeve. So we're just going to pin the outside first, so that pin the inside, and I'll show you how that works with your sash after we sew the sides. So like I was saying, luckily the anchor fabric doesn't move much, so you don't really need to pin all the way down. Like, it's just pretty helpful. So just make sure that your ends are matching up and you've got enough pins just to stabilize the fabric. You should be good to go. So let me show you this one sleeve. So again, we just pin the top, the neck area down one sleeve, just the top. We'll sew that side together first. Pin the other side. Same way. And then we'll worry about the bottom part of the sleeve next. Make sure your notches, you're matching up your notches and pin there. Hey guys. Just kidding. I know sewing is fun, but sometimes you just gotta make it interesting sometimes. Get it? All right. So that's pretty good. All right. So we're pinned. Now let's go to our sewing machine. All right, you guys, so the goal here is to sew in one continuous motion. If you need to maybe stop at the center seam at the neck, you can do that. It's totally fine. But my goal is to sew one continuous seam. Okay, here we go. So again, we're working at the 5/8 seam allowance, and you're gonna back stitch at both ends. Take your pin out, make sure you're not sewing over pins because you will break some stuff. We are not about to break nothing, not today. Okay, so make sure you're back stitching. Let that bad boy go. So I still haven't replaced my needle. Do not judge, I'm about to. I'm just focused right now. I hope you guys are watching the needle and not me. So you know what it is. Woo. Make sure your stuff is... I'm actually going to make sure you guys are actually watching the needle. Sorry for moving you around so much. So at any point that you see that your fabric is not matching up on the bottom with the top, then just stop and make sure it's matching up in between your needles. I've got to change that. It's getting on my nerves, this noise. Okay, so once we get to the top of the sleeve, it's like the shoulder area, you'll see where the flap is. I'm gonna stop there and we're gonna go a little slower. Because at this point we're going to pivot. I wanna make sure that all of my fabric is down. All right, so make sure your needle is down when you pivot. Raise the foot and just turn it to make sure that you're maintaining your same seam allowance. Make sure you're back at that 5/8. And we are also sewing at a curve right here, so you just want to make sure that you're still at the 5/8 seam allowance, which you will see here your stay stitch is within that. Just want to make sure my fabric is flat on the bottom. No clumps. And now I'm at a straight part. Ugh. Kind of irritable with this like fabric on top. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so you just want to make sure it's matching up and so straight. We're back at the 5/8. So now we've reached the center seam on the neck. I'm gonna stop here and make sure that my fabric is matching up again. So I've almost reached that other shoulder area. So I'm going to flip my fabric and make sure everything is on the bottom. And I'm gonna prepare myself for the next pivot. Okay, so we reached the next little floppy area. Make sure it's flat. So I've reached a good spot where I'm going to pick up my presser foot, and I might need to go over a little bit further. See how I can do that. Showing you guys the right way. All right, so my point of doing that is just to make sure that I'm still hitting at that 5/8 seam allowance. It's not perfect, but I'll check it once we're done. That's the only tricky part about working with this this particular pattern, is that those edges right there, because you're joining essentially 3 separate pattern pieces into one seam, so it gets a little funky, but it's doable. Jeez, sorry. Jeez, my life over here with this fabric. Just kidding. All right. Finally got to the end, so we're about to stay stitch. And there it is. So let me go ahead and check this last little corner. What I'm gonna do is flip this so you guys can see it. So this is where I joined those 3, and here's where you can also see my stay stitch. I don't like that, so I'm gonna clean it up. But the other one looks pretty good, actually. I know I'm working with black, so you can't really see it. So here's 1 seam, here's 2 seams. So that actually joins pretty good. So let me clean this one up real quick. Just kind of round it out. This time around, I'm going to work with the opposite side, so my seams are going to be up. So I can kind of see what I'm doing. Yeah, I don't think yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that. Okay. So y'all, this is the sew along. So we are straight up sewing along, okay? Y'all are seeing everything. My mess ups and everything. Okay. So I'm just gonna match up my 5/8 seam allowance with my previous stitches. Make sure we're all in line. I knew it was gonna be a little off. It's just where I ended up pivoting before. I knew it was off. So I'm just gonna blend it in until it reaches my stitch. Hopefully this works. Man, I need to clip that just a little bit, but I'm better. Why did I do this? I don't know. This is that damn Gina moment. Damn Gina. Just kidding. All right. So I can see it. I'll clean up my stitches in just a second, but I have got to get this right. Let me just flip this shit. Got it. So, I mean, as you know, some stuff you just gotta work with, work around, get it right. Much better. See that? Boom, boom. That's what I wanted. All right, so now we're gonna go back to our dress form and pin the bottom of our sleeves to the front and back of the bodice. Hey guys. All right, you guys, so we have just sewn the top of our sleeves and attached it to the front of our bodice. Boom, so now you have the top of your sleeve attached to the front of your bodice. We are going to pin the bottom of your sleeve. And at the bottom of your bodice, front and back, we are going to also include the sash that you've already attached. Okay? So here's the front of your bodice and the sash. We're going to sew this in along with, or to attach it to, it's going to be included when attaching your bodice back. So let's get to pinning. Excuse the noise. So again, just make sure you're matching up your ends. And your notches. When you get to the sash, just make sure that your sash is attached. I would hold it towards the front of your bodice. Just make sure to still match up the ends of your bodice back to your bodice front. Make sure it's included and pinned. That's the key to it. Just make sure it's pinned. Gotten to a point where you can see this gap. It's a little loose right here. So where the back of my bodice is straight and the front of my bodice is a little curved. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to make a little room. Just to make sure that it's smooth and lined up. done so. Okay, so we are now sewing the second sleeve together, back stitching at each end. as you approach the curves, you'll start to notice some bunching on one side of your fabric. So the side that's straight, you want to keep straight. And as we get a little closer, you'll notice more pins here because I've had to spread out the bunching. And what you'll see here is on the side that is bunching, I've had to slit. So I actually took the scissors here and cut little slits and spread out the fabric and pinned so that I can make it straight. If you need to go a little slower during filling the curves, you can do that. Just make sure you take the pins out. So here's the bunching part right here, as you can see. So I'm hoping to straighten that out. Straighten it out. You just want to pull a little bit, give it a little tug, and it will straighten as you sew. So now I'm getting to the sash at the end. Don't forget the back stitch. Let's see how it looks. So here's the curved edge, and it actually comes out rather straight. Now what we're going to do now that we have everything sewn together is we are going to iron all of our seams open. So you're going to take this to the iron and iron all of your seams open. And that will give it a nice crisp, clean look. So when you turn it on the outside, it will look very good. And that concludes the bodice. We have sewn the entire bodice together. I'll be posting pics soon. Bye, guys. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching the videos for assembling our bodice for Vogue 8825 for the jacket dress sew along. We are almost done completing our entire bodice. I know it's taking forever, but you're hammering through it. We're almost done. The only thing left is to assemble and attach our sleeve cuff, and that's it. And after that, it's all about the skirt, pleats, pockets, and hemming. We're done. That's it. Who said this was hard? It's not. So anyways, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment below. If you would also like to find out more information about the sew along, please visit the blog www.afashionaddict.com/sewalongs. You will get all of the details and information, and don't forget to follow me online on Instagram. I'm a_fashion_addict1. On Twitter and Periscope, I am at afashionaddict1. Hope to see you guys soon. Continue following along because we're almost done. Thanks so much for your patience, guys.